My name is Sirifan. I'm 75 years old, and I need to begin tonight with something that took me most of my life to admit, not to anyone else, to myself. There were people in my life who exhausted me, not because they were evil, not because they intended harm, but because something in the dynamic between us, something in how I showed up when I was around them, left me consistently, reliably, predictably depleted. And I kept seeing them, I kept answering their calls, I kept making myself available. I kept performing the role of someone who had more to give than I actually had. Because I believed, deeply and without examination, that noticing the exhaustion was a form of selfishness. That a good person, a loving person, a spiritually developed person would not feel drained by other people, would have enough, would give freely without keeping any kind of internal account. And so I ignored what my body was telling me clearly. I dismissed the fatigue as my own weakness. I called my resentment ingratitude. And I kept pouring from a vessel that was becoming emptier with every encounter, until one day I realized there was nothing left to pour. Japan has a concept that I didn't have words for until I was in my 60s. The idea that your energy is not infinite, that it is a resource as real and as finite as time or money, and that how you manage it determines not just how you feel, but who you are able to be. Not who you want to be in theory, who you actually show up as in the real moments of your real life. The Japanese approach to this is not about coldness, not about withdrawing from people or building walls or becoming unreachable. It is about something far more sophisticated, about understanding the difference between giving and losing, between connection and consumption, between relationships that nourish and relationships that drain, and about building the inner structures that allow you to remain yourself in the presence of people who, for whatever reason, tend to pull you away from yourself. The first thing this philosophy taught me is something I had been avoiding my whole life. Not all relationships are equal in what they cost you. Some people leave you feeling more present, more like yourself, more alive. And some people leave you feeling less, not because of anything dramatic or obvious, because of the cumulative effect of a particular kind of interaction. The interaction where you cannot be fully honest, where you are managing their feelings at the expense of your own, where you are performing a version of yourself that they can tolerate, but that costs you something real, where you leave the encounter and feel a particular kind of tired that is not about the time you spent, but about the self you didn't get to be. Recognizing this distinction, allowing yourself to see it clearly, rather than explaining it away with guilt, is the beginning of everything. I spent decades explaining it away. This person needs me. This person has had a hard life. This person cannot help how they are. All of these things were true, and none of them changed the fact that I consistently left our encounters depleted. The Japanese wisdom I encountered in my 60s taught me something that cut through all my justifications. You cannot nourish others from depletion. You cannot offer genuine presence when you are running on empty. The care you give from exhaustion is not the same as the care you give from fullness. It looks similar from the outside, but the person receiving it can feel the difference, and you carry the cost. If something in this is reaching you tonight, if you recognize your own patterns of exhaustion in what I'm describing, then stay with me. Because what I want to share is not a way to become cold or to abandon people who need you. It is a way to remain genuinely available to the people who matter while protecting the resource that makes your availability real. And if this message found you at a moment when you needed it, stay close to this space. Come back when the depletion returns, because it will, and having somewhere to return to matters. The first practice this philosophy offers is the discipline of noticing. Before you can protect your energy, you have to feel it, really feel it, not as a concept, but as a physical reality. The Japanese attention to sensation, to the quality of one's inner state as something real and worth attending to, begins here. After every significant interaction, pause. Not for long, a minute, two, and honestly notice, how do I feel right now? Not how do I think I should feel, not how would a better person feel. How do I actually feel in my body in this moment after that encounter? The answer is information, not judgment, not decision, information. You are beginning to build an honest map of what your relationships actually cost you versus what they give you. And this map will guide everything else. I was 63 years old the first time I did this honestly. I had just left a lunch with someone I had known for 30 years, someone I would have called a close friend. And I sat in my car for a moment and I asked myself honestly, how do I feel? And the answer surprised me with its clarity. Tired, slightly smaller than when I arrived. As if I had been performing for 2 hours rather than being, as if I had spent the entire lunch managing what I said, how I said it, how it would land, whether she would be upset, whether I was being kind enough, careful enough, giving enough. And I had felt none of that effort consciously during the lunch. I had only felt the result of it afterward, in my body, in that particular heaviness. And for the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge it without immediately explaining it away. This friendship costs me something. That was true. I didn't know yet what to do with it, but I knew I had to start with the truth. The second practice is what the Japanese call ma, the concept of meaningful space, of the pause that creates quality. Applied to relationships, it means that constant availability is not the same as genuine presence, and that creating deliberate space between yourself and draining interactions is not withdrawal. It is the condition that makes real connection possible. When you are constantly accessible to everyone, you are fully present to no one, including yourself. Ma teaches that space is not empty, it is generative. The silence between notes is what makes music possible. The space between interactions is what allows you to return to yourself, to refill, to show up genuinely rather than automatically. I began practicing Ma in small ways, returning calls later rather than immediately, taking a day before responding to messages that created that particular feeling of internal compression. Allowing myself the space to notice what I actually wanted to say rather than reflexively giving the expected response. None of these were dramatic. None of them required explanation or confrontation. They were simply small acts of returning to myself before returning to others. And what I discovered was this: the quality of my presence in relationships improved dramatically when I stopped making myself constantly available. Because when I did show up, I was actually there. Not performing, not managing, there. The third practice addresses the question of what you do when a draining interaction is unavoidable. Because some people cannot be kept at a gentle distance. Family, colleagues, people whose presence in your life is structural rather than chosen. For these situations, the Japanese philosophy offers the concept of inner detachment. Not emotional coldness, inner spaciousness. The capacity to be in the presence of someone without being consumed by them. To hear their words without having those words restructure your inner state. To remain yourself, rooted in your own center, even when the pressure to be pulled away from yourself is strong. This is not something you can think your way into. It is something you practice. You practice it by returning repeatedly to your own physical presence when you feel yourself being pulled. By noticing when you have started to disappear into the role of managing their experience and gently returning to your own. By keeping some portion of your attention, even a small one, inside yourself rather than entirely external. This returning is not selfish. It is the practice of remaining someone who actually exists in the interaction, rather than becoming a mirror for someone else's needs. I developed a simple practice for this that I still use. When I am in an interaction that I know tends to drain me, I keep a part of my attention in my feet, just my feet, on the floor. Their weight, their contact with the ground. This tiny anchor to my own physical presence does something that seems disproportionate to its simplicity. It keeps me from disappearing entirely. It maintains a thread of self-awareness that allows me to notice when I am being pulled and to choose, consciously rather than automatically, how I want to respond. The draining interaction still happens, but I am present within it rather than consumed by it. And the difference in how I feel afterward is significant. The fourth practice is perhaps the most difficult, and it is the one that most directly challenges the story most of us have been told about what it means to be a good person. You are allowed to be selective about where you invest your deepest presence. Not your basic courtesy, not your fundamental human kindness. Your deepest presence. The quality of attention and care that requires something real from you and leaves a mark. This is finite. It cannot be distributed equally to everyone without being diluted to meaninglessness. And the Japanese understanding of quality, the concept of giving something the full attention it deserves, rather than spreading attention thin across too many things, applies here. The people who receive your deepest presence should be the people whose presence nourishes you in return, whose company costs you something but gives you something back, whose relationship is a genuine exchange rather than a consistent extraction. This is not about being transactional. It is about being honest about what genuine intimacy requires. It requires something from you, and you have a finite amount to give. And how you choose to allocate it is one of the most important decisions you make about your life, even though most of us never consciously make it at all. For the last 15 years of my life, I have been more selective than I used to be. I have fewer relationships. The ones I have are more real, more mutual, more honest. I am more present in them because I have more presence available. Because I stopped spending my presence on interactions that took without giving. I had more of it for the ones that actually mattered. And something unexpected happened. The people I pulled gently back from were mostly fine. They found other people, other sources. Life continued. The catastrophe I had feared from drawing any kind of boundary never materialized. What materialized instead was more space, more presence, more of the quality of engagement that makes a relationship worth having in the first place. My name is Siripan. I'm 75 years old. I live in a small temple where the concept of energy is taken seriously, where what you receive and what you give are both understood as real, where protecting your capacity to be genuinely present is not selfishness but wisdom. Not the wisdom of withholding, the wisdom of knowing what you have and choosing carefully where it goes. The Japanese art of protecting your energy from draining people is not about becoming cold. It is about remaining warm enough, real enough, full enough to offer something genuine to the people and the moments that most deserve it. Before we part tonight, I want to ask you something. When you sit with the people in your life, honestly, which ones leave you feeling more? Which ones leave you feeling less? You don't have to do anything with that answer tonight. You just have to let yourself know it, because knowing it is where everything begins. And if you want to share it, tell me in the comments. Where are you right now with this? What has recognizing your own depletion shown you? Because sometimes naming what has been invisible is the most important thing of all.